What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Stay Hot. I'm Blaiden Kirk, joined as always by my two favorite co-hosts of all time, Matthew Spinauer and Theo Ash. On today's episode, we have a very special guest and an NBA draft expert in Chip Jones. Welcome to the show, man. It's great to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited to get going.
So we're going to obviously preview the NBA draft, of course, and then recap the NBA finals a little bit later. But before we get into that, how's everyone doing, Matt? Theo? Chip, of course.
I always get caught by surprise with how soon the NBA draft is after the finals. As a primarily football guy, I'm like, oh, we've got months and months and months to like talk about the draft and whatnot. And in the NBA, it's like, oh, season's over, draft now. And so I'm glad that we have so I have no time to look at the prospects after it because I like don't know when it is. So I'm glad that we have the opportunity to talk with someone who does.
I like it. I think the NFL draft process drags on for such an insane amount of time. I mean, you're going on like 4 or 5 months of just like draft stuff if your team's bad. Even with the NBA, it's not that long, even if your team is out of it really early. So I'm pumped for it.
I don't know. I was going to ask, like, do you have problems scouting players, Chip, like while the season is happening? Like, do you find that annoying? Because I always kind of think it's nice that I have the time where no games are happening. I'm not missing anything. Like, if I had to scout during the season, I would probably watch less football. So do you have problems with that? Does that annoy you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely pretty tough, especially like because like you said with NFL, like it's like one game every weekend. Obviously, it's like longer, but you guys probably get like the condensed film at some point if you're trying to grind through that. So it's like for us, it's like there's pretty much a game on. Someone's playing every day, as well as the prospects like in the NBA. So it definitely can get pretty tough. Usually, I'm watching between like maybe like 5 to 8 games a day. So it's definitely a lot of work, but you know, you kind of just got to pick something and prioritize it sort of, I guess.
Do you get overseas? Like, obviously a lot of prospects aren't from America playing in college leagues, which is another thing. Is it difficult to get like film on some of these like European guys?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be. Like, access to film is somewhat challenging, especially at the start. There's like pretty good channels that upload a lot of the stuff to YouTube, and like a lot of the overseas leagues actually just like let you sign up for an account. Like Australia, the NBL has a lot of big ones. There is just free on YouTube. Like all the games just get put on there. So it's not that bad. I have Instat access though, so I can just like look up any game that's ever played and just download it. So not too bad once you figure out some way to get access to something.
Right. Well, going into the draft then, just general strategy, I think, like, obviously in the NFL, there's the whole debate, best player available versus like a fit on your team. What is your philosophy with that? If you were running a team, and would you just take the top player on the board all the time, or do you think like filling needs matters more or less or whatever?
Yeah, I'm pretty big on. So the way I view it is like the best player available that you can provide the context to develop. Because some people, like some players need specific things in their context to like actually succeed. Like if you get a guy who's like a rim protecting center and you have terrible perimeter defenders, if you just throw a rookie center out there and tell them to like play drop coverage and their like guard is like Trae Young on the pick and roll, like that's just they're not gonna develop because it's just you're putting them in such a bad position. So I mean, I just look at like what team a player can like develop well with, and then like putting them in a situation that they can. Like, for example, like the Lakers with LeBron, like most of their offense is just running pick and roll through LeBron, like switching on to finding the weakest defender and just attacking them. So if you get a guy who's like really likes to play with the ball in their hands, like Taylor Horton Tucker kind of has this issue where he likes to play with the ball in his hands, but he's next to LeBron. So it's like he doesn't get the ball. So it's not really a great context for them to develop in. So I think like you just got to look at like what type of like offense do you run, what type of skills like are needed to succeed, and just pick the best player who can like fit those skills.
What team do you think is the best at that? Do you have any like stick out in your mind as being like really good?
Yeah, I would say probably Memphis. I think Memphis is up there. Yeah. I think it's weird because there's a lot of different schools of thought. I think there's some teams that are like so focused on player development and like prioritizing certain skills, like the Raptors, like getting like really long athletic guys. And then like teams like the Thunder, like they're just shooting for upside, so they try and turn everyone into a ball handler. So it's like they've drafted Darius Baisley, and for like 5 years, they've just been trying to get him to handle the ball, and it doesn't work very well. And like, it's funny because the first year they had like Dort and Baisley, and they made the playoffs with Chris Paul that one year, and both of those guys like broke out towards the playoffs where like everyone was super hyped about them as young players. And then now we're like 3 years down the line, and like Chris Paul's left and the team's not very good, and they're literally just like trying to get those two to run pick and roll for 3 years, and it hasn't worked yet. So it's just like all the hype has kind of died down because they don't let them focus on like developing the like ancillary skills. It's just like handle the ball.
Right.
No, I agree. I think not the Timberwolves. I think the Thunder are kind of coming up to the point where people are going to get really tired of like, oh my God, we have all of these picks in the future. And I saw they traded their 30th for another like far off future pick. Eventually people are going to, the expectation for them is going to be that they actually have to start winning.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be, I think we got one more year of losing. And
they've got one more.
Any team that's like currently tanking is going to keep tanking, I think, because next year's draft class is like really very, 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 very strong at the top.
Do you think there are any, like, talking about like players developing in systems, are there any fits between the prospects, some of the prospects this year that you just really love? Like, oh my God, Chet to any of the teams, or even further down the line, like late in the lottery or later than that you just love this player to this team?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I don't know if they'll get to line up. One of my favorites is like Dyson Daniels to New Orleans. I think that's like a picturesque fit. Because I think last year you had like Lonzo in New Orleans, last year, I guess. But, when you had Lonzo in New Orleans, him and Zion worked really well off of each other. And I think Dyson offers a lot of like similar skills. So I think like being able to get another like long perimeter defender who can like kind of handle the ball and like pass and just play smart off of their stars would be like phenomenal. I also think like Chet to Houston, I really, really like that fit, but it's never going to happen because I don't think he's going to fall past 2. So, but it is what it is, right?
I've seen some people put Jaden Ivey up in sort of that top 3 tier 1. Do you buy into that, or do you see him as like pretty solidly a tier below that?
I think Chet and Paolo are like by far and away the 2 best prospects, and they're kind of in their own tier. I think they're pretty close. And then I think Ivey's kind of in a tier by himself behind them as like the 3rd best guy.
So you'd say Jabari then is even a tier below Ivey?
Yeah, I would say so.
I'm asking because I have a dynasty league and I have the 3rd overall pick. So I'm trying to
Matt and his fantasy teams.
It's one of these, sometimes in drafts like this, you get in a situation where the pick is kind of made for you. Like I think about that for like the Hornets with LaMelo Ball. It's like, yeah, they were just going to take whoever fell to them. So that's what I'm hoping it ends up playing out like. But
for someone who's completely like doesn't know anything about these prospects, could you break down kind of like the general overview of those top 4 and what you think their strengths and weaknesses are, and maybe why you ranked them in that way, 1 through 4?
Yeah, of course. So I think the first thing with like, we'll start with Chet, I guess, at the top. He's probably my favorite. So I think like obviously the big thing that everyone thinks about with Chet is like, can he handle the strength because he's strong enough to play on the inside? So I think the couple ways I look at that is like, one, he's very good technically at like preventing himself from really like dying because of contact, right? So he's really good at like lowering his center of gravity, and he'll often like use his arms. So, like players are like backing into him and trying to push into him with their shoulders. He uses his arms like out front. So then like a lot of the push is just absorbed by pushing his arms back. And he does this thing where like he'll stick like his hips or his shoulders out like in front. So when someone's driving into him, they're trying to get their shoulder into his chest. And if they can, they like throw him off because he's pretty thin, right? But he's really good at preventing them from getting that contact. So that's kind of the way I think that he kind of gets around that. And I think the other thing is like part of the appeal with Chet is that he can be your like primary pick and roll defender if you need, but he can also play as like a second side rim protector and kind of really like, I think a lot of the elite defenses, they have a really good rim protector, but they also have a guy who can help clean stuff up as well. And that's kind of what sets them ahead of the other ones. So I'd say Chet, like you're mainly looking at him as like one of the better defensive prospects out there, like in the last few years. So, I mean, you're looking at massive defensive upside. And then I think the other things are like, he has shown some flashes of the ball handling stuff, especially in transition. He's been really, really efficient as just like grabbing rebounds and running full court and scoring. I think his like points per possession as a transition ball handler is like 1.4. So he's getting over a point per possession as a ball handler in transition. It's insane. And then, so I think it's like transition offense, like handling the ball, like passing, kind of connective passing. He's really smart. He keeps the offense moving. And then he's pretty good like rolling to the rim. He's a great finisher and he's a great shooter. So I mean, you're just looking at a guy who offers a lot of cool skills offensively and then it's like phenomenal on defense.
Who would you comp him to? Like a Gobert, or
I don't know if he has like a real comp out
Yeah,
there,
I mean,
honestly.
I tend to stay away
He's
from
built
comps.
like me.
Got that Theo Ash.
He's got that
NFL
Theo Ash NFL build. I don't know.
I mean, I think some of the ways, the way that I've kind of tried to explain him in like a comp sense is I think like a lot of the reasons that like the Bucks offense and defense works are a lot of the things that like Chet is really strong at, right? So like they have Giannis where he's super long and he's like very good at like getting those blocks as like the secondary rim protector next to Brook Lopez. I think Chet's really good at that stuff because he's got, super long arms. He's really smart, so he always knows where to go. And he's got really good like hand-eye coordination, getting the ball, like making sure he's not fouling on those. And then also, the Bucks, when they get their stops, they love getting out in transition with just Giannis bringing the ball up. So I think when you look at Chet, it's like the transition, bringing the ball up, offering like the secondary rim protection, and then also being able to run 5 out because your big man can shoot that Brook Lopez kind of gives you. I think Chet offers a lot of the similar things to that. So like, I don't think those are like player comps, but I think in terms of like how I would operate my team if I had Chet, it would kind of look similar to what the Bucks do because I think he offers a lot of the same skill sets that like kind of make them as dynamic and unique as they are.
Theo, you've said that you're maybe not the biggest Chet guy just because he's not really like a number one option type deal offensively, and maybe that's what you're looking for with a number one.
Well, I fall into the he's built like me criticism. All right, that's where I'm at. Like, I think like body type, and that's not even so much. I think Paolo would probably be my number one, just because I think like I look at him. And I think that it's safer just because Chet doesn't really have a comp and we haven't seen someone quite like him. You don't really see someone like him in the NBA right now. And that makes me a little bit nervous, but it also could be exciting because like he's kind of got a superpower in that way where you don't see anybody like him and he's still there. So there's two different ways to look at it. I'm a little wary just when I see someone that thin, and maybe that's just my football background being like, you can't be real like thin bad. You need to be big, and basketball is not quite the same thing. But I don't know, just got the built like me trait, and that's the only thing really. But yeah, if he's clearly survived some pretty high level, yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
I'd say my concern with his like size is definitely more to do with the injury aspect of it than it is like him actually being able to like go out there and defend the inside at a high level in the NBA. I mean, the number of centers that can actually get through 80 games a year in the NBA, I could probably count on 2 hands. So I think that even if he does do a good job avoiding contact at that size with the number of games the NBA asks, I wonder if he has the body type to really hold up through like a 10, 15-year career, or if it'll end up looking like Kristaps or something like that, where he breaks down pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be interesting. I think one thing with like the haven't seen someone like this before thing, I think Chet and Paolo, like coming into the year, a lot of people looked at Evan Mobley in Cleveland as kind of similar to the Chet concerns, and he had a really phenomenal rookie year. And I also think in terms of like a power forward that's creating shots and taking a bunch of jumpers, people looked at Julius Randle, who was phenomenal last year. So coming into this year, a lot of people saw Paolo, and they were like, oh, it's like Julius Randle. And then he was horrible this year. So then everyone's like, oh, it's like Julius Randle. Oh, no.
What do you think about him?
If he can be the good version of Julius Randle, he might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paolo, like for me, is like very clearly in the top 2. I think like usually I'm very strict in like this guy is better than the next guy, so like take him, he's the better one. Between them, I think it really depends on like what you're looking for, because I think both of them are just going to be phenomenal players, like phenomenal prospects. So I would say like the big thing with Paolo is like his decision making and his passing is really, I think, kind of getting undervalued. The big thing with Paolo is like the high school tape. Because, you get like 3 years of college. We get like 1 year and sometimes don't even play the whole year. So it's like we get like 20 games. So we got to look back and look at what they were doing in high school and AAU. And if you look at Paolo there, and even you got to see it at Duke, but not as much, he was like a point guard. And he makes like very, very advanced pick and roll reads. And at Duke, he got a bunch of like post touches and isolations, which people are like, oh, he relies on this stuff. But like, I think that was more of just the way Duke used him. And I think that's a big thing with like Chet, Paolo, and Jaden Ivey, all three of them, is like the ways they were used in college is probably not how they'll be used in the NBA. And that's the easiest thing to fix with a prospect is just like the way the position you're using them in the role that you're kind of asking them to play, right?
And
Right.
when you're looking at a guy like Chet, who's a high level defender, do you think that kind of that's a skill set where you're like, okay, if he's not super good offensively, at least like let's say he's not super good offensively right away, at least we know that he's going to be a high level defender. Whereas like if Paolo's offense doesn't immediately transition, you're kind of like, oh no.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something to consider. I'm pretty confident that Paolo's offense is gonna translate. I'm like 100% confident. Like I think both of them are kind of no fail guys. Obviously, there's like injury, but like if we're realistically not project, because like they haven't really had injury issues either of them throughout their careers. So if we're not going to project that onto them, like if things go right, they're both going to be great players. I would say like the reason I prefer Chet by like a hair, and the reason why is just because like in NBA team building, you know, you give such a high percentage of your salary cap to your star players. So I look at like teams like when you're building a dynasty and you're trying to compete for years and years, like you have your core, you don't really change out those star players, but you change out the role players around them a lot. So I personally prefer stars that have like plus defensive value because that opens up the pool of what type of role players I can get around them. You know, I'm a Bulls fan. We have DeMar DeRozan as our star player. He's got a lot of obvious limitations. So it means the role players we get around him have to do a lot of specific things really well. Whereas when you look at like Milwaukee with like Giannis and Drew Holiday, like those guys are phenomenal defenders. So they can just sit Grayson Allen out there and like it doesn't really matter and he can just shoot, right?
I think every basketball guest we brought on has been a Bulls fan. I think like we brought Kenny Beecham on and Rusty Buckets and you, and it's all Bulls fans, all of them. And they've all talked about DeRozan and they've all talked about how the role player is. Anyway.
What do you want the Bulls to do this offseason?
I want them to just kind of stay the course mainly. I actually don't think you change that much.
Really?
Yeah, I think people are kind of misunderstanding what the Bulls are doing right now. I think there's like people think they're really trying to win a title. I think they're just trying to like revive the brand image because like
yes,
we literally went into a tank and like have you guys heard the Luol Deng thing? Like Luol Deng was like playing hurt and they asked him to take a pay cut on his contract so that they could like afford to really compete. And then they were like, oh, we'll get you back next time. And then he got hurt a bunch and like the contract ended. They're like, yeah, we're not paying you. Like, and they like almost like they messed up some spinal tap surgery. He almost died. Like, we went into a tank with one player development staff, like our entire team. We had one person responsible for player development as we entered a tank. And then they would tell like certain players they weren't important enough to take up the player development coach's time. So like, I think they were just trying to like fix the brand image and be like, we're player friendly and trying to compete. Please be willing to come to us in free agency. And then also like just having a competent offense and defense helps you develop young guys.
Yeah.
So
same with the Knicks.
Kind of the goal is to just fix the brand image and like develop players.
Same with the Knicks. I almost feel like some of these big like classic NBA teams that have been bad for a long time. It's just like we got to get back to relevant. Like it doesn't matter if we're winning a title or not. Just like let's be a destination again. And yeah, I definitely feel like that can be kind of an underrated thing. Is just like let's just make the playoffs. That's why I think the Knicks are always and they can't get anybody, but like one of these days the Knicks are going to trade for like some washed up star like Westbrook or not. Mitchell's not washed up, but like someone who can't win a title maybe, but can just make them good. And people will be like, what are you doing? But they just got to be okay. They just got to be like the Knicks again in the playoffs or something like that. But yeah, Bulls definitely. Going down the list, I guess, Ivy is a guy who I think is really like, I've seen his name a bunch pop up. It's like, oh, he deserves to be mentioned in these. You buy into that. What's Jaden Ivey's game out of Purdue like?
Yeah, I mean, so like the obvious, like I don't know how familiar you are with Ivy, but like the obvious first thing is like he's just like a 99.9 percentile athlete. So I mean, he's genuinely like a similar level of athlete to like Ja Morant. So I mean, he just flies across the court. He's like a super powerful mover, and I think the big concern a lot of people have with Ivy is like he's not really a point guard, so he's more of a shooting guard, and they're not totally sure if he can like shoot super well because his shooting, it's like there's a couple of red flags, and then on top of that, like he did well defensively, especially as like a freshman and with Team USA and FIBA. But then this year at Purdue, like there's definitely some like engagement stuff where like he kind of just wasn't really trying that hard on defense. So I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned with that. But like in terms of just getting like an elite level of prospect, he's like 20 years old and like an 100th percentile athlete, and he does have a lot of skill. I think one thing like similarly to Paolo, like Purdue, they played through their two bigs. They had this like this like 7'4" Canadian guy that they played through most of the time, Zach Edey. So like they didn't really let Jaden Ivey run a bunch of pick and roll, but like in the times where he did run pick and roll, he was pretty successful. So I think like looking at Ivey going to the NBA again, it's one of those ones where like you're just getting a really young, phenomenal athlete with like a lot of solid skills, and maybe wasn't used in the best role, so you didn't really get to see the best out of him in college.
When you look at like there's some red flag shooting, is that from percentages that you look at, or is it like his physical shooting form? Like what do you look at more when you judge shooting?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of things. So like one of them is like pull up 2-point shots is like generally a good indicator of 3-point shots. So it's like pull up 2-point shots, floaters, free throw percentage, and then looking at their shooting percentage, what they shot on the catch and what they shot on the dribble, and then of course like the mechanics, like what they're actually doing with their shot, right? So Ivey didn't really do super well on pull-up twos or floaters. His free throw percentage is like fine, but not like phenomenal. So there's like a couple of things there. And generally like his shot's a bit mechanical and a bit slow. So he shot pretty well off the catch, but not off the dribble. So I think as like a catch and shoot floor spacer, all he has to do is like draw a slight closeout and he's just going to blow past the guy. So, I mean, he doesn't really need like to be a phenomenal shooter, but I think he's good enough on the catch. And I think people are underestimating like defenders can't really pressure like the ball with him. Like they can't step up and really get in his face because he's just going to go right past them if they get too close. So they have to give him that room so he can kind of live with a more, mechanical, less like super quick release shot.
For sure. And then kind of the last guy in the big names is Jabari. And I've seen some people mock him as high as number one, like the NBA is really high on him or something.
I've seen him won a fair amount. That makes you pretty.
Yeah, of course. They've been saying that all year. I don't like Jabari's a cool prospect. He does a lot of things really well. I like him, but the problem is like people put him number one, and I feel like they're just saying stuff to say stuff. So like the way I describe Jabari is he's ISO ball for nerds, because like he doesn't pass. He's really bad like in terms of like executing and seeing passes. He doesn't really look for them. He can't really dribble. Like his handle is pretty non-functional. He can't really dribble at all. He's just really tall and he takes a bunch of threes, and that's mainly what he's offering, and that's kind of it offensively. And then defensively, he's truly a phenomenal perimeter defender. He's really light on his feet. But the problem is like people look into like people just say, I feel like people kind of make things up about him. So like first, like they always say he's an elite athlete, and there are traits. So he's pretty light on his feet and he changes directions pretty well. But at the same time, like one thing that kind of historically filters for athleticism with like prospects is like dunks and blocks, just like getting up. And usually you can kind of filter out which prospects are athletic enough and which ones aren't. Jabari had, I think, like 12, maybe 14 dunks and a block percentage like below 3. If you look at the guys who got drafted in the NBA who are 6'10" and match those things, all of them are just white dudes. It's like Ryan Kelly and like Indiana and Wisconsin bigs. So it's like people label him as an elite athlete, but he's not. Like he's pretty at 6'10". He's got like a 7-foot wingspan, so like he's not a super long wingspan compared to his height, and he's pretty much like exclusively a below the rim player. And then he doesn't really get around screens well defensively. So it's like if he's your perimeter defender and they run pick and roll, he's like not necessarily going to be able to get around the screen and like keep up with the ball handler. So there's some athletic limitations that are a little scary. And then like generally dribbling is like one thing you really can't develop. You can get like a little bit better, but you can't like become a good dribbler from being really bad. So it's like when we're looking at, I don't know if you guys have this in football, but in basketball, there's like certain skills we're like really confident we can help a guy get better at, and then ones that we like can't. So for us, it's like 3-point shooting and on-ball defense. Those are like the two easiest things to develop. And those are the only two things he's really good at. Yeah, other than like he tries really hard.
In football, there are some things that are hard to develop, but no one realizes this. And any problem I flag with a prospect, people will just be like, "Oh, I'll just get better at that. And
like,
it'll be like
it'll
something like, it'll be like the way they like, it'll be like yards after catch or something like that. And just like the physically way they like solve problems in space and like the creativity of what they do with the ball in their hands. It's like, you don't just develop that, man. You either have that or you don't, or something like that. Or like with the offensive
It'll be like a running
lineman,
back can't break tackles.
or like anchor with offensive linemen. I
like
always feel it's like, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things where I'm like, I'm not sure I bank on this to get fixed, but people don't want to ever hear it. They're like, oh yeah, the coaches.
People have the sports video game. It's like the sports video game development. You get like +2 in every stat because you're a young player. So
Right. I really think that like sports video games totally affect how people look at people think team building in the NBA is like how team building is on 2K.
Once he gets enough VC, we'll just spend it all on his blocking and he'll be able to get those numbers up. Look, just buy the DLC.
That's why you got drafted.
Just make him
one.
jump higher. Like
with Jabari, I mean, do you think he's going to be good enough in isolation in the NBA to actually be worth giving those touches consistently for like a really good team?
No.
That's tough.
And I think like because you're relying on a really perimeter-based shot diet, which like you saw that with like Jason Tatum in the finals, like that's not really a comparison per se, but just the idea of a player that's super reliant on being able to convert jump shots as a wing, that's pretty volatile. And like there are situations where you can't always get those jump shots. And if you can't get those easy shots at the rim, because I think for a guy who's like 6'10", Jabari shot like 43% on twos. And like at the rim in the half court, he was like 56%. Usually for someone at that height, like a good finisher, you're looking at like 70% and above. And he's at like 56. And he's also like, he's got this weird build where like his lower body, it's kind of like a spider or something. He's super like able to change direction super well. He's super like light on his feet. And then his upper body's like a Lego character. Like his body, like his torso is like a plank. Like he cannot bend at all. It's just like the arms move. So like if you watch him try to drive into the paint, it's like really he can't get up, so he's finishing below the rim. He can't really like contort around defenders. And then so the finishing just really, so then it becomes like if he can't score at the rim and he's just going to be like a 3-and-D player. I look at like guys who have been drafted where it's like, oh yeah, they're an elite 3-point shooter. They're big and they're a really good on-ball defender. And you get guys like Mikal Bridges and Otto Porter. And it's like, those guys are great, but like, or were great at their, best with Otto, right? But like their career highs are like 15 points per game. Because like, even if let's say Jabari's like the best catch and shoot guy in the league, Klay Thompson's getting like 6 catch and shoot threes a game. If Jabari's like shooting 40% on like 6 attempts a game, which is like insanely high percentage and volume, that's like 7.2 points a game.
Yeah, that's a little concerning. So do you have him fourth, like on your big board then, or do you have even more guys ahead of him?
I guess I have Jabari 5th. I guess.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Who else would be below him then, or above him?
I'm a really big fan of Dyson Daniels from the G League Ignite. I think he's going to be a very, very good player. And he's also been flying up in workouts. So apparently he's kind of gone from like, I was kind of really high on him when he was like fringe lotto before this. And now he's getting top 5 hype. So
yeah, I saw a couple mocks of him to the Hornets. And I don't know if that's realistic for us anymore.
Probably not.
As a Hornets fan, what do you have any ideas or any thoughts about what maybe they should be doing this offseason other than finding a coach who actually wants to be on the team?
Intends to stay with them? I mean, I think a lot of the like coaching stuff is like an interesting idea. I mean, you have to pay Miles Bridges this year, right? So you got to do that.
Yeah.
And then I'm not really sure. I think part of their issue is like, I think they need like part of it was coaching, because I think Borrego is a good coach, but I feel like they needed someone who's like kind of more who could make their offense like easier, I guess, because I think one of the problems is like a lot of times with how many possessions there are in basketball, it's just whatever team has the easier strategy to execute will just win, just because like the execution they need is on such a lower level. So like if you can just run pick and roll like every possession down the court, that's like the easiest way to score. Like Giannis just runs through a guy and then it's like they scored, right? So it's like super easy. Whereas like I think LaMelo is not really at his best operating in the pick and roll. And so I think part of that might be because they didn't really have like a big rim threat. He's never really had a guy who's like a big dunk threat in the pick and roll. And I think looking at him, like his problem is like getting to the rim and finishing is like not necessarily a strong suit. So usually you want a pick and roll partner who can do that. So I'd say the biggest priority for me is like getting a pick and roll partner that suits LaMelo really well.
It also helped their interior defense a little bit if you got a guy like that, probably.
Which is horrifying. Yeah.
Mason Plumlee, Arisher.
I'm hoping Kai Jones, I don't know if you liked him last year. I'm hoping Kai Jones can get a little bit more play this year. Or any of their young players get a little bit more play this year.
I really like JT Thor.
I like JT Thor too. I get why Kai Jones didn't play. Like he was ridiculously raw. Like, of course, he's going to take a year in the G League. And I kind of get it with Book Knight, although not really. But JT Thor losing minutes to McDaniels, I thought was pretty rough for them. And I was very surprised with how bad they were defensively that he wasn't getting a little bit more play.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I wasn't the biggest Kai Jones fan. I generally tend to stray away from centers who don't want to be centers. But I know a lot of my friends who I like really respect the opinions of, who are a lot smarter than me, did really like him. So I mean, I just tend to be like, all right, maybe I'm wrong on this guy.
Yeah, I can't see him as like the Hornets like plan going into the season at center for sure, but I'm excited to see him at least get some real minutes.
Who are some of the guys like?
Do you have any guys that you feel like are?
It's been like the fifth time.
I was just gonna say if you had any sleepers.
We're so good at
Is
this.
it the next question on the outline?
Well, no, I think like there's just a little bit of lag, but yeah, it's just
there's a delay.
There's a little bit of a delay. It's either on my end or Theo's. I can't quite tell, but
probably on mine.
No, I was just gonna ask if you had any major sleepers.
Yeah.
Like I know in our chalkboard chat, they keep bringing up the. I think it's the guy from Kansas.
Braun or Agbaji? Ochai?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, Ochai. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. For me with Ochai, like he's like. I think he gets a little bit too much trash for like his not being able to handle the ball. I think he's a little better than people say, but I think Ochai is definitely like the very much the 3-and-D. Like he's the prototypical guy you would want like around like a LeBron. Because you'd want him to just like be like playing like someone else creates. So I don't know how you guys would translate this, but in basketball, like there's like advantage creation, right? Someone creates an advantage. They force a second person to come double them, or the defense to collapse on a drive to try and stop them at the rim. And then the ball gets kicked out and it gets moved around until someone can kind of leverage that advantage. And I think Ochai is very much in like he wants to be leveraging advantages. He's not going to create them for himself. So I would say like he's probably going to thrive best with like a team that has a really established, good, consistent creator. Then he can be really useful as like a 3-and-D guy.
I think NFL equivalent of that.
To like the NFL for that. I think that would be like an interior, like an Ndamukong Suh. That's what that sounds like to me.
That's what I was going to say.
Just someone who absorbs blockers on the inside.
Yeah, something like that, basically. So I think like Ochai would be really good at punishing. Someone else is getting so much attention. Ochai can punish a 1v1 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I would say in terms of like sleepers, are we talking like how deep are we talking? Because are we talking like later lotto, like mid first guys, or am I supposed to go like
let's do both.
Deep here?
Let's do both. Let's do both.
Got it. So I mean, I guess towards the top, my two guys who I'd really look at is like I think are really getting kind of underlooked. I guess one would be like Johnny Davis, which I think is a really interesting one. I think John Hollinger had him ranked 29th on his board yesterday, or 2 days ago or something, which is a bit confusing me. So the thing with Johnny Davis that's really interesting is like he was a sophomore, freshman year. He was like a solid role player in Wisconsin, but didn't get a ton of run. And then this year he kind of took over as their like offensive leader. They were projected to finish like towards the bottom of the Big Ten, like not really be a good team. He led them to like I think they were second in the conference at the end of the year. They were like a top 20 team all year. He was a 20 point per game scorer as like a 6'5" guard. So the interesting thing with Johnny is that his context was like really, really bad. Like the team he was in, you hear like some bad things about like college teams. There were like 3 dudes other than him on his team that scored more than 3 points per game. And I think they ranked like 300th in 3-point percentage and like 280th in 3-point volume. So And Johnny's not really like, he's not like a Steph Curry. Like, he's not taking a bunch of pull-up threes. He's like a drive and get himself to the rim type of guy. So he was basically playing with the Jordan rules, and he still averaged like 20 points per game in a Power 5 conference as a 6'5" underclassman guard. And I think, people are concerned about his shooting percentages, which weren't the best. But again, there's like the context thing. And then also he got hurt in like their fourth to last game, but he still played 3 more while hurt and shot really poorly, and it dragged his shooting percentages down a ton. So if you look like before that, it's a bit better, I think. But yeah, I think Johnny, in terms of like, he's just a super, super high motor guy that like plays very good defense and also scored 20 points a game as an underclassman 6'5" guard in a horrible offense. And I think like looking into the NBA, there's a lot to be excited about, as like you can get him in a team that's not as bad, hopefully. And, he's worst case scenario, he's a pretty good scorer who's also a good defender, and that's just a good player.
For sure.
Yeah.
As a Wisconsin fan, I love to hear that. Sort of. Not really. I'm not actually a Wisconsin fan. I just like Green Bay. But anyway, as someone who knows who Johnny Davis is,
Nice.
I love to hear that.
Theo's a fake Wisconsin fan.
Yeah, have you seen the Taco Bell commercials?
I have seen the Taco Bell commercials.
Have you
He's
guys
in
ever had that in football?
just
Like,
prospects.
so Johnny's like not a top pick. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
go.
No, it doesn't quite make sense why they've gone with Johnny Davis before he even gets picked somewhere.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big fan of the ad. I mean, it's fine. So I'm not really sure if
His
I'd spend
acting
lot of
was
pick
a
on
little.
Johnny, but
When you think about selling contact and fouls, I'd like to see a little bit of a better actor there for an acting performance for Johnny Davis.
Yeah, but you can go with the Yo Quiero Johnny Davis campaign with your fans, like as you go into the season,
That would be like.
I'm trying to think
that
of
would be
NFL
like-
players that's happened with.
Who is like a early second round like wide receiver this
it'd be like
year?
a third round pick.
That'd be like
guy in the
Christian
NFL.
Watson. That'd be like
the
Christian
comparison.
Watson.
It's just it is a little weird.
That'd be like Christian Watson being the
Right.
face of Taco
So
Bell.
I know like Saquon was definitely doing ads like in his pre-draft.
But it's not like an NIL thing, right? Like he had declared. So
Yeah, it's just like
No, they
just picked
straight
him.
up
and it was like
needed-
going on during the finals, like it was nationally broadcasted.
right.
It's like a third round pick in a Super Bowl commercial.
This-
It was just real weird. It was like,
Taco Bell's NBA scouts would agree with you, Chip, that he's an underrated guy and he's going to be a star. They looked at everybody and they're like, man, I love what he does. Like the offense was so bad, he's going to be a star. They were pitching him like a NBA front office when they were choosing their guy. They're like, this guy's underrated, I guess. Who's a late first round sleeper that you like?
I mean, so I would say there's like maybe 2 guys that kind of jump out to me. So one is like Marjan Beauchamp, who I don't really see as like a late first. I see him as like a end of the lotto type guy. Marjan's really interesting because he has like a really weird kind of wonky path where he was like in high school, he was like a consensus 5-star recruit, right? And then he ended up, after his sophomore year of high school, he had to move because there was like a mold problem in his house. So he was having like health effects from that. And then he was in like non-Seattle area Washington. So his level of competition wasn't super high, but he was like dominating in AAU against the best players. And he was dominating the like local Washington stuff. So he moved to a really good prep school. He was really good there. And then he wanted to enter the NBA draft. So one thing with us is like recently we've been having a lot of like new pathways to getting the NBA. So there's like the Overtime Elite League. You can go overseas and play in Europe. You can play in the G League Ignite thing. So there's a lot of different pathways. One of the ones is like you can just train with like a former NBA trainers. Will just train guys out like straight out of high school, just train for a year and then go in the draft. So he wanted to do that. So there's an NBA strength and conditioning coach that like started this training thing, and he did that for a few weeks, and then COVID happened. So then all of a sudden that got canceled. So then he just had nothing to do, which was really, really unfortunate for him. So then he had to move back home, and he started playing. He wasn't sure if he could play D1 because he had a bunch of offers, but he wasn't sure because he wasn't sure if he still had his amateur status because of what he did. But then he could play at the local JUCO. So he played in JUCO for a year. He averaged like 40 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists in JUCO over like 10 games. And then he went to the G League Ignite this year. So he was the first guy. He's going to be 21. So he was the first guy who was like not straight out of high school to go to the G League Ignite. he averaged like 15 points, 7 rebounds, was pretty productive in the G League. So, I mean, it's just like he's never really had a solid like situation, never had any consistency where he can kind of just focus on basketball and grow up until like this year, really. And then he is like pretty good athlete. He's like 6'6.5", maybe 6'7", 200 pounds. He's got like a strong frame. He's really quick, and he's just a really smart player, good defender, like great passer. And I think like a lot of those shooting indicators we talked about earlier, like the floaters and the mid-range pull-ups, really good on those. So, I mean, the big holdup is the three-point shot, but he shot it like above average in high school. And then he has really good indicators right now. So it kind of feels like he'll translate. And also he's just an elite finisher at the rim. He shot like 70% at the rim at 6'6", which is unheard of in the G League.
That is cool. Yeah, that is cool about NBA scouting, that like all of these things can, like, you've got to pay attention to like the most random guys from the most random places.
How do you feel about Shaedon Sharpe then? Because he's not played very much basketball recently, which makes it hard.
No, he has not. I mean, Shaden's interesting. I definitely don't buy into the whole. I have him like in the mid-late lotto area. I think so. The big thing with Shaden is like people. He reclassified up a year, so he was the number 1 recruit in next year's class, and then he reclassified up. So people are like, oh, next year's class is stronger, and he was ranked number 1. So obviously, this class, which isn't as good, he should go to the top, right? But that's like he's like the most Mickey Mouse, like fraudulent number 1 high school player ever. Like so. First of all, there's a guy in France, Victor Wembanyama, who is 7'4", with a 7'8" wingspan. That's the number 1 guy next year. That's the generational prospect. So he's not as good as him. Scoot Henderson was ranked ahead of him, but he reclassed up as a junior to go play in the G League for 2 years. So he got removed from the high school rankings, but he was ahead of him. Then Amen and Ausar Thompson, they're these 2 twins that are like freak athletes. They both went to the Overtime Elite League, so they got removed from the high school rankings. Jalen Duren, who went to Memphis and was in this year's draft, he reclassed up a year to go play at Memphis. So it's like all these other guys were like better than him. But since they all like moved to other things, it was just like Shaden kind of was really, he just got really hot at the right time when everyone left and they needed to put someone number 1. And so he got put up in this number 1 ranking. So I think in terms of like what he does, he's like a really good shooter and he's a really good jumper and he's a pretty smart player, but he really struggles to like beat people with his handle. He's not like super bursty or quick. So he's really like kind of a really athletic jump shooter and like cutter, but I don't really buy him being as good as like top end prospects. I don't think he's like a premier prospect per se.
Is there someone that you would label as the most overrated player in the league or in the draft class? Like you've talked like maybe Jabari or Shaden has some flags, but is there someone that you just really don't like that everybody else is high on?
This is your Theo Ash NFL pick right here.
This is your
so I'm going to paraphrase with, I like all the prospects. I like all of them as players. I'm working towards my way in a job in the NBA. I need to not get bad publicity here. So I like all the players. I don't dislike anyone, but
yes,
the one player who I do think is getting a bit overhyped is Benedict Mathurin. He's a guard. I guess he's a wing from Arizona. So I think, again, going back to John Hollinger, he wrote an article with his big board. He had Benedict Mathurin at number 5, and he's generally considered like in the top 8. I think there's probably 14 better players. I don't think he should really go in the lotto even. So the thing with Mathurin, he scored a ton of points, but like Hollinger's pitch is kind of explains why I'm on the other side. He said, I think he starts with, in mid-tier outcomes, he'll be a $20 million a year value player. And he says he's like a 3-and-D player, right? He's a great shooter, and he's right. Like he's a great shooter. He can shoot off movement, like, you know, where he's coming off a screen and he can like catch, set, and shoot right away, which is really valuable. He's a really good shooter, and he's a really good athlete. Like, you know, dunking, getting above the rim, cutting, very good. He's phenomenal out in transition when he like leaks out and stuff, right? But then it's like his handle and his feel for the game and like his passing ability are kind of far behind. So he might only ever be able to be a 3-and-D player is the second paragraph of that. So it's like, it's going to provide 20 million value as a 3-and-D player. It's the first paragraph. Second paragraph, kind of limited to just being a 3-and-D player. Third paragraph, also he's athletic, but not currently good at defense. So it's like, you're saying a mid-tier outcome is 20 million for a 3-and-D player who currently does not do the D part of 3-and-D.
Right.
Yes.
And also he was listed as 6'7" all year, and he measured in the combine. I was like, he's not 6'7", because one of his teammates is 6'7", and everyone's like, no, he's just he's 6'4", like 6'4.5" without shoes. So I mean, it's like a 6'4" super athletic shooter, which is not like okay. I don't know. He's not really a good defender. He doesn't really dribble. He doesn't really create shots. So it's like he's fine.
I feel like that's definitely like the baseline of
top 5 pick.
That's like the baseline of being in the NBA, like very athletic, 6'4".
Yeah.
Once again, big thanks to Chip Jones coming on, being our NBA draft expert for today's episode. And now I'm going to throw it over to Matt for the weather.
All right, sports fans, have you heard about PrizePicks? PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love this, and I think you'll love it too. PrizePicks offers more NBA props than any other DFS operator and offers every player and stat category you can think of. Pick 2 to 5 players and an over/under on their projections. You can win up to 10 times on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. And it also allows mixed sport entries. Now, it's a little tough right now because there aren't several sports.
Baseball fans, this one's for you.
So
I guess hockey as well. Bet the Avalanche over on goals, and you're going to hit. Bang. Done.
And some other baseball bet, and you could do both at the same time, which is sick. Users that deposit and use our promo code will receive a 100% instant deposit and match up to $100. Just be sure to use the promo code STAYHOT. That's all caps. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com today and use promo code STAYHOT, or go to the App Store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made extraordinarily easy.
Do you guys want to talk about?
I had a baseball player already. I was going to say Ronald Acuna Jr.
Theo's always ready with the baseball.
He's
player.
A baseball. Yeah, I know dozens. I know dozens of baseball players.
That's more than I know.
We know more than Matt knows too. I guess I'm our resident baseball expert.
I'm trying to think.
I know the Yankees are the best team. Yankees are the best team in baseball right now. The Lightning are not the best team in hockey, but they're in the championship like they have been like most of the last couple of years. The Warriors just won the finals. And who just won the Super Bowl? The Rams. I guess they're not really a perennial powerhouse, but you know, we're one Patriots or Packers Super Bowl away from just all the favorites being in power.
Lame.
It is a little lame, but you know, I don't know. Like I said before, and I guess this goes into our finals conversation, I don't mind dynasties. I think that it's good to have a defining team of a decade. I think it's good to have a defining team of an era. And the Warriors being that and winning a title before and after KD and all that, I don't mind it. It didn't make me angry as some people, the Warriors won again. I don't mind it as long as they're not winning with KD. That's what really made me mad because I knew it was happening before the season even started. But this year I thought a bunch of teams had a shot. If the Warriors win the whole thing, you know, congrats to them. That's kind of where I stand. I think it's good to have a defining team of a decade like that.
Yeah, I guess it becomes a problem when you have like the Patriots where they were the defining team for 2 decades. And it's just like, and I know they didn't win the Super Bowl every year, but it was just like they were always
right.
good.
I don't think if I could go back and change that, I would. As much as I'd rather have it be the Packers. Maybe I would change it to being the Packers. But the Belichick Brady, I mean, that's what makes sports legendary, and that's what makes it worth talking about. Is like, you know, people like it. I swear, like
I don't mind it, but I'm not sitting here like I'm appreciating this greatness while I can. It's just that stuff always gets me a little bit. They're great, you know. Shout out to them, congrats. But if the Celtics had won, I would have been like, "Damn it, no!"
not the.
No, I mean, it would have been cool if the Celtics won as well. But I'm not like I watched this entire NBA season only for the Warriors to win again. I want my money back. I can't believe I wasted my time. No, look.
You're going to go to your cable company and be like, give me my NBA subscription.
What a waste of a season. I had to watch Steph win again. I don't think that way, man. And, you know, I think it's good. I do appreciate like what we're watching in Steph and Kerr and Draymond. And I mean, Clay. I mean, not even this finals, because there wasn't even like a banner series from those guys, although Draymond was quick to retweet some stats about how well Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown shot while he was on defense. But I mean, Curry was a top 10 player for me already. I think just talking about legacies and what this means for everybody, I think he was just such a franchise, an era-defining player, a basketball-shaping player, an offensive powerhouse, and just the greatest scorer we've ever seen with all these rings and 2 MVPs. Like, to me, like, I don't think it's crazy to discuss him just with how much he changed the game and how much he defines this era, putting him as one of the more influential players in NBA history. I had him top 10 before this. The finals MVP, like, obviously that accolade matters a lot to some people, but to me, it didn't even really. And I mean, I've always been a little bit of a Steph fan, more than former Steph Curry hater Matt Sponauer over here and BLAIDEN.
I'm not a Steph Curry.
I'm not a Steph Curry hater until 2 years ago.
Nah, come on.
But anyway,
no, I mean, on our consensus rankings, you know, the top 10 has Steph Curry in it. So, like,
he's now in that tier below MJ, LeBron, and Kareem for sure, undoubtedly, with about 8 or 9 other guys. That's how I'm looking at it.
I think that's fair. Like, if you look at the consensus, it's
yes.
MJ, LeBron, Kareem at top 3. Then you have Magic, Shaq, Kobe, Larry Bird, Tim Duncan, Wilt, and then Steph Curry.
And those guys are
Does that put Steph at 10?
Yeah, they put Steph at 10.
Okay, I don't hate that ranking. I mean, I don't hate that top 10, but I think Steph is there. I already had him there. I would even put him maybe a little bit higher than that on my personal one, but it's not much. It's like 9 or 8 probably for me. I've said that he's the GOAT point guard, which makes it tough because Magic Johnson, that also makes me put Magic Johnson a little bit lower than someone, but I don't know. I just think like he's just such a world beater. If I could build a team around any point guard, any era, I would take Steph. And I'm not even like an old team, like an old player, like hater. I have Wilt as the GOAT center. So, or actually, no, I don't. I have Kareem as the GOAT center, but I have Wilt number 2. So I don't know. I just think I hold Steph in a very, very high regard already. I mean, Matt, I know you don't hold him in such a high regard, and you think he needed this finals to get top 10?
He did. I think so, 100%.
Well, was it the finals or was it the finals MVP that he needed?
He needed to be undoubtedly the best player in a finals series. To be top 10 all time? Yeah, he did.
He was in 2015.
No, he wasn't.
Don't care. He was undoubtedly the best.
Not.
Yes,
he was not.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't. LeBron was. Easily. Not even a debate.
Well, LeBron was the best player in basketball. Well, LeBron was the best, but
he was the best player in that
Steph
series.
was the best player on a team that won the finals.
Right.
Steph
he just needed to be the best player
like
in a series. That's why he didn't win the award, is because they didn't want him to give it. I'm telling you.
They wanted.
Maybe you could argue in 2019 he was, or you can argue that in 2017 or 2018, like his impact was more, and I probably than Katie's, and I probably would agree with you, but I think to clearly be the best player, and there's not a debate about it, he's going out and doing I think that is huge for him. And it makes it, he would have been the only top 10 player who was not a strong defender. He would have been the only top 10 player who didn't have a finals MVP. So it's nice to see him, get one of those, and now he's solidly top 10.
So we can all agree that for the question of the day, where does Curry rank all time? He's at the very least top 10.
Probably bottom 8 in the 8 to 10 range.
I agree.
Maybe if you're really, really optimistic, the 5 to 10, the back half of the top 10. That's probably where he ranks all time.
That's fair. I can get behind that.
And that's what this finals was really about. It's not even really about the Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
It's not about the rest of the Warriors. It's just about
my
Curry.
timeline was just congratulations, Steph Curry, after the Warriors ended up winning.
Yeah. I think we talked about a couple episodes ago, what does Poole think about more, the rings or the money? And after the finals, he went to Wiggins and he recorded a video, and he's like, "We're about to get a bag. We're about to get a bag." That's what he was chanting after winning the finals. So I think that kind of answers that question. Pool parties all summer. So, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how the Warriors keep this core together. I personally, would you bet on them to repeat out of the West next year?
Yeah, they got to be the betting favorites, right? Yeah, there's too many questions about other teams. I mean, are you going to... I guess if you wanted to say that you had the Clippers, I could get behind that.
That's what I think. I
think Clippers are the other team, but I would say that I wouldn't bet on Kawhi Leonard health. So I would say that yes, the Warriors are the betting favorites to come out of the West again. The Clippers, I understand. Everybody else, I think there's definitely some other good contenders, but probably not that guys that you at least want to see before you say, yeah, they're going to be the favorites to come out of the West.
And what about the Celtics? How do you feel about them next year? Do you think they'll be,
I think this is their chance. I think they kind of blew it. Their offense stinks. And they could be better than this. They could. Offensively, they just don't do much, dude. It's so lame. And it doesn't have to be like that. And it's not a personnel thing, so maybe I am high on them. But it's not great right now. That's
clearly
not awesome.
You're not.
Yeah.
I think Tatum still has some pretty serious growth to be doing. I think we've seen some takes where it's like, well, Tatum cannot be the best player on a finals team. And I think that seems harsh to say that right after they lost. But I mean, I kind of agree with it. I kind of agree with like this current version of Tatum. If he doesn't show growth, we talked about it with Chip and how he was like, Tatum is a guy who relies very much on the jump shots and isn't an elite finisher for a player of his stature and a player of his caliber. And I think that he needs to grow that area of the game before he can be someone who is the best player on a finals team. I mean, you look at the finals MVPs these past couple of years, and you know, the guys who win these finals, they're world beaters. They're Giannis, they're LeBron, they're KD, they're Curry. And it's just like Tatum is not quite on that level, and almost no one is. But you look at the young guys who are, I think like Luka comes to mind, Jokic comes to mind, Giannis still comes to mind. Like Tatum to me isn't quite in that tier yet, and I think he needs to get better as a finisher before he is. So, and he's 20. He's not 19 anymore, so we'll see how much growing he has to do in that area. I mean,
and he also has to get better at moving the ball. Because a lot of the ball
it's the whole Celtics too. It's actually Tatum. Actually, I thought did his best. The Celtics, their offense is just sucks, and they don't do much on offense.
Yeah, he was better than Jaylen Brown at playmaking.
I mean, yeah, Jesus. I mean,
fair enough.
You could, I could say this, like they could totally. Maybe I shouldn't be low on them because hypothetically, like they can come out with like a more complex involved offense with the exact same players. And I think they could be right back. But to make the finals, you need some breaks. You need to win the close ones. And they got over the Bucks with an injury, and they got that in 7, and they beat the Heat in 7. And doing all that just to lose in the finals because your offense is just collapses 50% of the time, that's a weak way to go out. If you're going to lose the finals, lose it because you're not like talented enough. It's not a talent thing with the Celtics. It was
if you're gonna
totally
lose,
coached poor offense.
I don't know.
Lose because you suck.
If you're gonna lose,
and the East was so close this year too, right? Like the Heat, the 1 seed, and like the 6 or 7 or 8 seed was like not separated by much. So coming out of this year's East, I mean, could have gone a lot of different directions, and you saw that because the Celtics had to win 2 Game 7s to do it. So I think like you could say like, oh, the Celtics could get better if they do this and this, but every team in the East is thinking the same thing. Like the Bucks are just saying we win that series easily if Middleton is healthy. The Heat are saying we've got all these, like we just need to make a trade and get some higher level, some more potency on offense. And the Raptors are saying let's see if we can get a star and like a true one and see if Scott or maybe Scotty will develop into that. So everybody has all these things that are like, if this, we can win the East. To bet on a repeat winner of the East in this East, I think is a silly one. I don't think the Celtics will be back next year.
And
I think it'll be Bucks Clippers. That's my
I like that take. I like that take early on. I do want to see what teams do, but you can see the defense with both those teams. You can see they have the all-time great player, and you're projecting a little bit of like, hey, maybe it'll be different. So I like the take. I would agree. It is disappointing if you're a Celtics fan to know that it's so hard to get through that East and to blow it on throwing the ball to the other team half your possessions.
All the turnovers.
Oh my God, dude. I have never seen a team in the finals just turn the ball over like that. That maybe wasn't like just completely. There's been a couple finals teams that have maybe been a disaster because they got so hurt, but not the Celtics.
No, they're just
for
whatever reason could not hang on to the basket.
It's like that sloppy.
LaMelo would never.
Darius
when the
Garland,
Hornets
the Cavs,
win 50 games
healthy
next
Cavs
year.
team.
Do you still think the Hornets are winning 50 games next year? Now that
I think the Hornets. I think the Hornets can win 50 games next year, depending on what happens at center. I'm sticking by my guns.
Okay.
Kenny Atkinson can go to hell. Screw that guy. Yeah, screw that guy. I see people trying to defend him. It's like, well, he leveraged his situation. You got to respect it. No, I do not. Actually, not at all. And people,
you had a deal in place, and you went out on it. You're a grown man. It's a team. That, you said you coach, he can back out on the deal. Respect in that.
Yeah, he can back out on the deal, but I'm still valid in not liking him. He's allowed to do it, but I don't have to like him for it. And what really bothers me about it is not getting him as head coach, even though I was excited for him. It's them how people talk about the Hornets. Like, he saw Miles Bridges with the pink lemonade. he saw Montrezl Harrell, and he said, "I'm out of there." People blaming it on Michael Jordan. Like, who did he think the owner was? Did he like randomly realize this? Like, obviously that's not what happened. So hearing all those jokes has been really tough for me in the last 24 hours.
It's definitely because they won a ring. Like, he just won a ring with the Warriors and thought, I like winning rings.
It's because he's like, I can be the assistant coach here and win rings and be in California. I think I'm going to do that, actually.
As opposed to go to Charlotte.
I think that's...
And I understand that, but I wish he hadn't screwed us over.
Yeah.
Well, there's still some good coaching. It's not like D'Antoni got hired to be somewhere else or Quinn Snyder.
Very much.
It's not like, oh my God, we're totally left out to dry, whereas like there's no good coaching candidates left right now. So Hornets are still in a decent spot like that. But
Matt, you should apply to be the Hornets coach.
I'm going to, man. I got a good shot. But
I thought Chip had some pretty good ideas. We'll put a good word in. Put a good word in for him. Just make things easy and get a center. Yeah. You guys can co-coach. I wonder if we'll ever see that co-coaches.
Co-coaches.
We kind of already do. Never mind.
Like,
I'm just
in the NFL, we have like coordinators and shit. Like, it's kind of the same thing.
Unless you're the New England Patriots, yeah.
That's
so funny that they don't have coordinators. The Patriots.
No, they kind of have an offensive coordinator.
Who is it?
It was what's his face? Over the past, like, he was supposed to go to the Colts last year.
McDaniels.
Yeah, McDaniels.
Well, he's the head coach at the Las Vegas Raiders right now.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, the Patriots they did, but now
but they no longer do. They have no coordinators.
It's just Belichick.
Yeah,
it's just Belichick and his kids.
We'll see. Anyway, I don't know how this got to the Patriots. Let's wrap up.
That's pretty much it for us. We'll be back. What's today? Sunday. So Monday episode. We'll be back Thursday with another episode. I've got my days all messed up. Happy Father's Day to all you dads out there. I don't know how many dads watch our podcast, but if you're a dad and you watch Stay Hot, happy Father's Day to you. If you're not a dad,
happy Father's Day to Joe Burrow.
Happy Father's Day to Joe.
Thanks, Dad.
Hopefully, I saw a tweet. It was like Minka Fitzpatrick should wish Nick Chubb a happy Father's Day. But make sure you wish your dad a happy Father's Day. I'm going to go take mine out to dinner here later. But hope everyone has a wonderful day. Tons and tons of content coming away on all platforms. And as always, from Corn Boy, Bird Boy, and Lemon Boy, we will catch you all on the flippity flop. What's up, everyone? I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I know you trust us with your sports content. So Blue Wire now has a new podcast called Don't Trip, where they give sex, relationship, and dating advice. So make sure you hit the link in the description and subscribe for Don't Trip's hilarious and insightful content.